to our 22nd episode of Life Between the Notes, a podcast centered around musicians in South Central Pennsylvania. I am Kirsten Myers, here with my co-host Morgan Davis. And if you are tuning in for the first time, thanks for taking a chance. You may want to listen to our very first episode to find out more about this project, but in short, we want to share and give voice to the musicians in our region and in turn learn a bit about their lives, and also the musical culture of this particular area. If you are a returning listener, also thank you for coming back. And hi, Morgan.
Hi.
How are you today?
I think I'm all right. We just were talking about it's Monday, so I'm just getting ready, like still gearing up for the week.
Yes, yeah. I don't know why we choose to do these on Mondays, but
well, this is a good way to start a Monday. So
actually, it is, right? It could definitely be worse.
I'm just not sure my energy level's quite there, but we'll get there.
Yes, yeah. You had a big weekend because you participated in the Penn State Flute Day.
Penn State Flute Day. It's my second of 5 flute days this spring. So one last weekend. Last weekend was Mid-Atlantic Flute Convention, Penn State, Philly next weekend, New York Flute Club at the end of March, and then our flute day at Millersville on April 6th. So if you're a flute player and you live here nearby, near Millersville, April 6th. But wow. It's like 'tis the season of flute fairs.
Yeah, I had no idea. Okay.
Yeah, who knew?
Well, great. And Morgan and I recently released an episode about Morgan's new project called The B List. And if you want to know more about that, you can check out episode 21. So we have essentially been in hiding for a few months, but life has gotten busy. So we are still dedicated to continuing this project. So it just might look a little different moving forward. Speaking of things looking a little different, we also have a new logo.
Yeah.
We're not showing it to you right now. But it exists and it is in the works. So, and, let's see, and you can certainly see it on our social media, which we are on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And so that's our exciting new news for today. But actually, that is not our most exciting news because we have Shari Gleason-Mayrhofer with us. And as you will learn, Shari is just awesome. And we are so glad that she said yes. So, she said yes to being interviewed on our podcast. She's definitely already married, so she's not saying yes to the dress or anything. But Shari is a busy freelance musician and teacher in the Lehigh Valley-Berks County area. She is principal horn with the Pennsylvania Sinfonia Orchestra and a member of the Five, spelled F-Y-V-E, Wind Quintet and the Main Street Brass. She also performs with the Pennsylvania Philharmonic and musical theater productions in central and southeastern Pennsylvania. Shari serves as the executive director of the Friends of Chamber Music of Reading and on the faculties of Kutztown, Moravian, Lehigh Universities, as well as Muhlenberg College. Shari earned a Bachelor of Music degree in horn performance and music theory from Oberlin College Conservatory and holds master's degrees from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and Georgia State University. So thank you so much for talking with us today, Shari.
Thank you for asking me.
Of course. We're really excited to learn more about you. I've played a few gigs with you here and there, mostly with like Berks Sinfonietta and some Fulton Theater shows. And Morgan has played with you as well.
Well, and I'm already learning because I didn't know you went to UW-Madison because that's where I got my master's.
Right. That's right. I remember that.
Yeah.
You know what? Because you did a flute thing at Kutztown once, I think.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Now that you say it.
I remember like just walking by you in the lobby.
Yeah, that's so funny. I had no recollection. Now that you say it, it's back. But anyway, yeah, I don't meet like very many people who went to UW here. So yeah. Anyway, I'm already learning or remembering.
Secrets revealed. Awesome.
Yeah.
So, so honestly, though, all I really know about you is that you play the horn and that you knit. So, but oh, hey, she's showing us something that she knitted. Is that a blanket?
No, it's a sweater, actually. I'm sweating. I'm knitting it right now. It will be a sweater eventually.
Ah, nice.
Amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing.
Yeah, I don't have the conceptual skill for that. I think it's incredible when people can knit, garments, not just straight lines.
I actually can't knit straight lines. I always say that. Thank goodness, I actually started knitting, you maybe don't care, but in college, at Oberlin, they have what they call the experimental college. And you can take up to 2 credits in the experimental college, and it's taught by students and community people or some faculty or whatever, but they're all on just, these sort of whatever topic you want it to be, things that you want to learn more on. So there's a lot of, like when I was there way back a million years ago, like they would teach somebody who was really interested in the science of Star Trek or whatever you could do, or it would be about some things about different social things, or it would be about theater things, or they had a lot of arts and crafts things, like there was knitting and ceramics and, just like any topic. If you could pitch a topic, if you wanted to teach a class on it, you could pitch it to the Exco board and get accepted or not. And it was 10 hours during the whole semester. It was like an hour, 2 hours a week. I can't remember, like 1 class a week for 10 weeks. And I took knitting, was one of my Exco courses. And I also took vegetarian Indian cooking that was taught by Hare Krishnas. So that was pretty wild too.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a very niche.
That sounds cool.
Yeah. And it was great. I mean, and although I will say, when I went to, you were there, I'm sure much after I was, Morgan, when I was at UW, and I went in for just I think I had one advising session with Orville Shetney, was that his name? He would retired, I think, quite soon.
But I know the name.
Yeah, he was a kind of a trip. But he looked at my transcripts and he was so appalled that I had taken knitting and Indian cooking for credits.
Well, I didn't have. Yeah, I think that's amazing. And I didn't have a great experience with my advisor at UW either, actually. So maybe it's just part of the job description to be unimpressed with people's previous transcripts. Like, you're supposed to be displeased.
Yeah, perhaps that's it. Yeah, because that was, but I found, they are actually 2 things that really stuck with me my whole life. And I cook a lot and I bake a lot, and I credit it sort of with some of that. And I think that, totally off any sort of topic, but I love that program at Oberlin. And I guess maybe that has sort of informed some of my life philosophy going forward, but that idea that they incorporated it and that they let you take it for credit, it actually, like I said, it's on my transcripts. So I love that.
That's very cool.
It is. Wow. And so that's the first time that you had ever knitted was there, but you hadn't done it before that.
Yeah. And so part of the project, it was a great way. It was a student who taught it, but she taught us the basics in the first lesson or 2. And then right after the first class, I think sometime we scheduled a meeting to go to the local yarn store, and we had to pick out a sweater pattern. And in the course of the entire semester, then we would work on a sweater. We'd go, and she would spend the first, I don't know, 30 minutes or something, and teach us a new skill. And then we would practice that a little bit, but then just spend the rest of the time working on our sweaters. And if we had questions for her just about the pattern or whatever, we could ask her. And then, I don't think anybody, maybe some overachievers, were done with their sweater by the end of the semester, but I sure wasn't. And, but she just gave us, contact info. And back then it was just phone numbers, and we could just contact her. But the bottom line with all of that is so I learned making sweaters. And to this day, I hate scarves and blankets, anything so if somebody had taught me to knit and said which is I think pretty common, start with a sweater or start with a scarf, right? It's easy and I get that, but I would have never stayed with it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and my mom was a knitter, and I have so many scarves and socks, so many, a few blankets, but oh my word. So many.
They're handy.
Yes, yes. Yeah, my neck is never cold.
Well, and I've tried to, my mom's cousin tried to teach me how, and I just couldn't. I don't know. It was like not. So I think it's interesting, this conversation, because it like just did not click. And I tried for a while, and then I was just like, forget it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never tried, but I guess I do enough with like the whole reed making thing that I'm just doing enough with my hands. I don't need, maybe I don't need to knit. So you currently live in the Berks County area. Now, is that where you grew up? Where did you grow up?
No, I'm originally from Minnesota. I grew up there, a small town west of Minneapolis, and then I went to college was when I left. So I went to Vermeulen College in Ohio, and then after that I went to Madison, largely like a Midwestern thing, because back in those days, Minnesota, they had reciprocity,
Yeah.
so I could go
Yes.
to school in Wisconsin, where in-state tuition, so that was good. And then actually, while I was in Wisconsin, I met my now husband. But right after that, like, so we had met, but we weren't dating or anything. And I had already sort of made this decision. I had finished my master's in horn. I did like you said, I did my undergrad, I double majored in music theory and horn. And, but I decided at the end of that, I had to write for our theory, the theory degree, you had to do an in-depth, write a paper in in-depth analysis, and then take written and oral exams and all of that kind of stuff. And that sort of freaked me out and put me off of theory for a while. So I was like, no more theory. So then I did my master's degree in horn performance, and then I finished that. And, I mean, it's a hard thing, right? When now what? And I took a few auditions, but like, that costs a lot of money, right? If you're doing national things. So I flew a few places, drove a few places. And, I made it to some final rounds here and there, the whole thing. Anyway, I couldn't really decide what I wanted to do, and I was sort of floundering. And so I had several friends who were living in San Francisco. So I drove out to San Francisco and I lived there for a little while. And then my car was totaled. My very, very, antique Chevy Citation with many miles on it was totaled on the streets of San Francisco. Somebody hit it, and I mean, it didn't take much to total it out. And so then there I was in San Francisco, and I had been doing temp work, like I couldn't find like a regular job, and this was during the Persian Gulf War started, and then it was like impossible to get work. And so there I was living off my insurance money from my car. It was so much fun. And
Wow.
And then I had sort of started, Rolf and I had sort of started dating a little bit more, like right before I left. Like I had made the decision to go anyway. So at that point I was like, forget this, I'm miserable, I'll just go back to Madison, and at least like the cost of living is lower, and I can probably get like some sort of stupid job. And so I did. So I went back to Madison, and then he finished up. He was getting his PhD in chemistry, physical chemistry.
Okay.
And then he got a postdoc at Emory University in Atlanta. So then I just was like, well, I can go anywhere. I don't have anything. So I went to Atlanta, and then I went to Georgia State.
Okay. I was wondering why Georgia, so that
A very, very long and circuitous route to get to. I had nothing better to do. And so I worked for a while. I mean, I worked actually almost the whole time as a secretary. So in Madison, I had gotten a job, secretarial work as a medical secretary. And then I got down to Georgia, and I worked in the microbiology department. And this comes back. I worked in the microbiology department I was in charge of I was called like a grants administrator, which was really sort of silly because I didn't really know anything about it, but they had the chair of the department was really, really prolific, and he was doing a lot of HIV research and all this kind of stuff. And he had just like, he and his research group had like 25 grants that they were maintaining through the National Institutes of Health and the NSF and all that kind of stuff. And so they needed somebody just to like watch all their deadlines and make sure and collect all this stuff. So they had just, it turned out, created into he was new to the faculty. So I applied for that job and I got it. So I worked at Emory doing grants administration, and then they had a campus at Grady Hospital, which was downtown. Anyway, so I was able to get into Georgia State pretty easily. And so then I decided that as long as I was there and something to do, I was like tired of not being in music and I don't really have a lot of inspiration. And I was just sort of on my own floundering. So I thought, well, this is a thing that I can do. So I went back and did a master's degree in music theory. And then my advisor at Georgia State was amazing. And she sort of rekindled at least my interest there. And got an teaching assistantship there. So I was teaching like the first year of music theory and oral skills, sight singing, and I loved it. Which is a weird thing. I shouldn't even really admit that, but I loved teaching oral skills and sight singing. So anyway, but then my husband got his job here at Kutztown, and he's originally from Berks County.
Okay.
And so so he got this job, and so we moved here. That's it.
Okay. So then your master's degrees, okay, so the one at Georgia was music theory. At Wisconsin, was it also theory?
That was horn performance.
It was horn. Okay. All right. Wow. Yeah. And honestly, that was one of my questions, like why music theory?
That is a good one. You know, I actually, when I applied to Oberlin. I did everything wrong. I always tell people this. Like I told my kids, every one of my students, I did it wrong. Don't do what I did. I only applied to one school, which was Oberlin College, when I was in college. And I applied to Oberlin because of their double degree program. Because so I applied to the college and to the conservatory. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do with a college degree, but I wasn't convinced that, you know, that music, like, I don't know, I was concerned about just getting a music degree on its own. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, all that kind of stuff. So I applied to Oberlin, only place I applied. And I mean, like, I had no clue. I mean, I was from the middle of nowhere, Minnesota. Like, I barely knew that Oberlin existed. I just like looked through the catalogs, and I didn't know what, like, I had no idea what its reputation was. I had nothing. So clueless. But thank God I got in. I mean, I felt like, well, I could always, like, if it worst case, right, you can find a local state university or something, like if I totally tanked. But
yeah.
Anyway, but so I applied to the college, you know, which is a really, you know, it's a quite fine liberal arts institution on its own, and then to the conservatory. And I thought initially when I went there, I like had declared a communications major, and I was thinking like maybe I would do some sort of arts management thing. And then I took some communications courses and hated them. So then I was like, yeah, I don't think this is going to work. And so I dropped out of the college, right? You know, I decided to just go to the conservatory, but I still was not convinced that I wasn't comfortable just getting a performance degree. So I wanted some sort of academic. I mean, I just think that my brain works that way. I like to study things, and I tend to be a little bit more analytical. So I just wanted some sort of academic
right
along with it. So I decided music theory.
Okay. Wow.
Randomly.
So, and was music, like, education ever in the cards for you, or that was nope?
No, my dad is a high school band director, was a high school band director, retired, of course, now, and really good one. I mean, you know, obviously I'm biased, but he had a strong program, and he was a really good, you know, high school band director. He taught I mean, he taught everything at one point, but mostly high school in the end. And like I said, really good at it. I really admired him and everything he did. And my mom was a public school teacher, elementary public school teacher. So I come from a family, and I have the utmost respect and admiration for anybody who teaches anything, especially, you know, in the K through 12 grouping. But I knew that I could never do it. I don't have the patience. I don't have anything that it takes to be a public school teacher. So hats off to anybody who does it.
And yet you are teaching, though, at least horn lessons, correct? And so, and at 4 different universities in the area too.
It's silly. I feel bad for the students. I said that, you know, at some point when I accepted at Moravian, I just started Moravian this semester. I was like, if you are going to college in the Lehigh Valley and you want to take French horn lessons, you cannot escape me. It's awful. But I mean, you know, it's fine. I like teaching horn lessons, and like I said before, I actually love teaching music theory and oral skills. But just like the general music and band and all that kind of stuff, that takes a level of patience that I have. I mean, you know, I mean, I think you guys, I would assume, you know, like the college teaching is entirely different, right? You know,
of course, and especially when it's one-on-one and it's not a classroom full of 20 plus children. And for me, is overwhelming.
Private teaching is totally different too. I mean, if you teach private lessons, because I started out with a joint ed and performance degree, and then I got about a year or so into it and was like, oh, I don't want to do this. I wanted to teach. I knew I wanted to teach, but I only wanted to teach the flute. And so it was just like torture to learn all the other things, knowing that like I had no investment in it. Like, why am I practicing the trumpet when I could just practice the flute? The trumpet methods was what ruined me, because we did trumpet and then brass in separate quarters. And I was like, no, we're done here. Like, I hate this. 4 days a week of trumpet was like more than I could handle. But, you know, it's interesting the other applications we find, and like you said about not knowing when you go to school, I had no idea what getting a music ed degree would be like. I just loved music. So I was like, of course I want to teach it. And then it turned out that I did, but not with a room. I mean, I would get eaten alive by a room full of middle school students.
Oh, totally. And, you know, one of somebody said, I think I remember, I'll never forget, I think it was maybe Dennis Williams, who used to be the choir conductor at Kutztown, but somebody said to me once that, you know, middle school, especially, right? Middle school, to teach middle school well, you have to love the kids more than you love the music, right? It's so hard. I mean, middle school, I have so much respect for I mean, because that's when they lose so many kids in middle school. So I think they should really have the brightest and best teachers, or, you know, going into middle school teaching, because middle school music, because it is so critical and it's so hard.
Yes. Yeah. And the kids change so much in that period of time. And the students I have that have gone on to teach middle school, you know, when they graduate, it's because that was such a pivotal moment for them. And they had a teacher who provided, you know, like the guidance they needed at that point. And they're so convicted about it. But I think otherwise you would really struggle.
So when did you start playing the horn? Now, you also play piano, correct? Right.
Yeah. Yeah, poorly. I mean, I started piano when I was like 7, that sort of classic, you know, took lessons when I was little. And I mean, and so I took piano lessons all through high school. I started playing French horn in our area. 5th grade was the time that people started, like the instrumental band program started, and that's when I started. And my dad, who I talked about, is a tuba player. My brother played the trumpet quite well. And so honestly, when it came time to pick instruments, again, like I was just clueless. And my dad's like, what do you want to play? And so he was just like, how about the French horn? And one of my babysitters played the French horn. And I was like, sure. Yeah. So yeah, there's not like some like inspiring, I love the sound and I really wanted to do it. It was just totally like,
yeah. Well, and you know, when you have a parent who is a musician, like often, like I find they're like if it's up to them, like to choose, and they're like, oh, well, horn or oboe, because they already know that these are needed instruments and ensembles and such. So
yes,
yeah.
I tried to talk my one son into the bassoon. I tried so hard. Like I was just like, you can rule the world if you play the bassoon.
He was not convinced.
No, he started off on the clarinet. I mean, like this was my thing. Like, okay, and you can switch to the bassoon, and then like at the time, and he was like, no, I don't want to switch. I was like, the clarinet.
My mom tried for a long time. She's not a musician, but she was like, don't you want to like play the oboe or the bassoon? Like, don't you want to play an instrument people need? No, I'll just keep playing this thing where there's thousands of us and it'll be fine.
That's fine for you. So that's good.
Just gonna trust that everything works out. Yeah. Just like choosing our colleges. We're just gonna trust that. Yeah. Which also, like, to me is so relatable, because I only applied to 2 colleges for my undergrad. And I also, tell my students, and I told my own kids, just give yourself some options, because I had, chosen, it was like either Ithaca or IUP, and okay, what's cheaper? Like that's what it came down to, which, I really loved Ithaca, and I, loved the campus and the environment there, but there was just no way. So did you start like taking private lessons right away?
I think I started private lessons maybe in 7th grade. So I just did like at home stuff, or, the regular school music program for 5th and 6th grade, and then private lessons in 7th grade or so. And then, I mean, I liked playing horn. And I do, a lot of people say that, just, I do think having the piano background really helped me. Not that my dad wouldn't help me, he certainly would have, but I felt like embarrassed. I felt like I was awful. And so I didn't ever want him to really hear me. So I would try to practice before he got home from work. I would like practice after school in my bedroom and try to get that done before because I don't want him to hear me. So so it was good having a little bit of my own piano skills, because horn, I mean, I won't talk like a lot of horn pedagogy here, but there's things that make learning the horn easier, like I said, and pedagogical things like, do you start on a B flat horn or an F horn or a double horn and all that kind of stuff. And what I did was probably not the most standard way, certainly at that point, but it worked. It really worked better for me, and I actually advocate that for students, young students on my own. But so I was able to do a little bit more because I was playing a B flat, single B flat, which is just easier to. The pitches are closer. The harmonic series, everything is closer together, so you're not just playing all open notes all the time. Remember that, right? But I think, I mean, I enjoyed it. I liked playing my horn, and somewhere along the way, so I branched out. I think I took like lessons from a local person when I was in 7th and 8th grade. And then in 9th grade, I went into Minneapolis and I took lessons from somebody, so a little bit, maybe a higher level with a little, and oh, that's actually, so I was taking lessons from this woman in Minneapolis, and then Barry Tuckwell, Barry Tuckwell was a pretty famous horn player. He passed away a couple years ago, but he was really big at the time. He's Australian and like had done like all the major recordings of everything. And he was coming through Minneapolis and going to do a master class. And so she encouraged me to apply to be in the master class. They were just accepting. And so I had to go audition for the master class with Kendall Betts, who is the principal horn in the Minnesota Orchestra. And so, so I did that, and I went and played for him. And then I can't even quite, and so I got into the master class, it was like 7 students. It was great, but the very disconcerting thing I found out when I got there, it's like all of the other students were college students, and I was in 10th grade. And so they were like, we're putting you last, because if he goes too far, like if they run out of time, we want you're first off the list, you know what I mean? which is fine.
You're like, okay.
And I was, I mean, I was in 10th grade and living out in a town of 1,100 people, 50 miles away from Minneapolis, like I had just nothing. I mean, I think we went to my dad again, like, as a musician, like we went to hear the Minnesota Orchestra. We had season tickets. So we would go regularly. And so, I mean, listen to classical music and stuff, but like, as far as the life of what's going on and how to, like, there was no thought, I had no thoughts of going into music. Like, it was just something I did. So, so that was, I mean, just sort of fascinating. Like, it was just an opportunity, and people said like, you could do this. So I was like, oh, I mean, to go do, and so playing for him and hearing the master class, like they were playing rep, but I just had no clue, right? Like I had just barely played like a couple movements of Mozart concertos and nothing. And so the students were like, there was somebody from we're at good schools like University of Michigan, University of Illinois. They were just like local people who were coming back, and they played really well, and he was incredibly gracious. And then there was a lunch with him and all of the people in the master class, and hearing them, all of those students talking about like sort of what they were doing and going on. But at the same time, there was a part of me that was like, I was hanging in, like, I mean, yeah, I played like high school player and they were playing like college students, but like I didn't feel crazy outclassed or anything. And I liked it. And then Kendall, the horn teacher, was like, well, very honestly, if you think that this is something you want to do more, I recommend that you probably want to step up your lesson, I mean, like find somebody who's going to demand a little bit more. So then I ended up starting to do lessons with him. And then I went to the Interlochen summer music camp.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did that following summer. And, or maybe that's, I knew. Well, anyway, so I went out to that, which is an 8-week thing, and it's national, like people from all over. And that was pretty big for me. Like, just
yeah, like, it's intensive.
Yeah, very much. Very much. And, I mean, again, for me, I hadn't, not like I was like homebody and afraid to leave, but for me, it was like, 8 weeks away from home when I was 16 was a lot, and it was far. And,
well, and Interlochen is Michigan, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like a 2-day drive, and,
yeah.
And it's a, like you say, it's intense. It's very structured, right? You have to wear uniforms and take classes, and I, of course, was on work study because I've always been like a scholarship, whatever, and I, not knowing the ropes, so I get there, and you have to find a work study job, and I didn't know. I'm like, I was sort of late to that whole party. And so I looked through the things, and I ended up, my job was cleaning the high school girls, the counselor cabin. So it's a very, very luxurious and job of mopping the floors and cleaning the toilets, which, I mean, I'm not averse to at all, but it was not all glamorous. And again, it's a great place. I mean, but there are people who go there starting like when they're 10, right? Like it starts with the juniors, and their families have histories. The camp was established in the 1950s, and so there were campers who just had families who had gone there forever, and it was like and there was the sailboats, and you could take the sunfish things out sailing and all that, and I just felt totally like
out of your element.
Water. Yeah.
Yeah. And an experience like that, I imagine, can like make it or break it for you.
Yeah, I mean, that was also interesting. I studied, so the teacher there, they had 2 horn teachers, but one was the gosh, isn't it horrible? I can't even remember his name, but who taught there like all the time, and he taught at the Interlochen Arts Academy, so not
and the Arts Academy is a year-long.
Yes, yeah, like a boarding school sort of thing, yeah. But so the horn teacher there that summer was Bill Vermeulen, And I don't know if you've heard of Bill Vermeulen, but he, I would say, is probably in a lot of people's estimations, like the most successful maybe horn teacher today. It's a little hard. There's maybe a little controversy that sometimes surrounds him. So pros and cons, but he has a reputation for producing like the best students, and his students get jobs. He teaches at Rice, I think. He has been on faculty at Eastman, but he is very, 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 very huge, exponentially huge in the horn world now. When I was there at Interlochen, I think he was 20. So he was like this prodigy sort of thing. He had just gotten I can't even remember, he was playing in the Honolulu Symphony. He had gone, I think, or was going to Northwestern. Anyway, he was just like a rising star at that point, but 21 years old, like barely older than, I mean, I think I was 16 or 17. So, and like I said, he's slightly controversial he's got a big personality. So, and he even did back then, and I struggled with that. I mean, and I think it was probably the first time in my life, in my short life at that point, where I had really struggled in lessons, right? I mean, I think, you're used to, I would think, anybody who's kind of, I'm guessing both of you are really, really fine musicians and smart, and probably, you work hard in your lessons and you have a certain amount of reward and success. And I was like sort of used to that. I was, for better or worse, I don't think necessarily a lot of innate talent, but I'm a hard worker in that sort of situation. I'm like smart in some ways, not like super smart, but I could learn stuff.
Yeah.
And it, all of that didn't seem to really help.
Right. So, well, was it because of just the intimidation factor?
Some of it was, I mean, I did learn a lot of stuff. I think it was partly his style of teaching, partly, there was just a lot of stuff going on. And it was, like you say, it was a really, I don't want to say traumatic, that's probably blowing it out, but it was a hard thing. It was not all just like, hot dog, I'm at summer camp and having a great time. It was right. A really hard, but I made a lot of really great personal connections, and I learned so much. I learned the things, some of the things that I don't want to do, or the things that, I learned the reverse lessons of being miserable, those being miserable lessons. I was, incredibly lonely and overwhelmed and all of that kind of stuff when I was first there. But I made some really good friendships, and that was really my first experience playing in an orchestra, like a lot. I'm trying to think. I don't think I didn't play in, I played in the youth symphony, I guess, again, the following year. I started playing in Minneapolis in the youth symphony, but up until then I had only played in my high school band, maybe some festivals here and there, but nothing. So for me, getting to play in the orchestra that whole summer was, I think that was definitely, critical, because I loved that, playing.
Yeah.
Exciting. And we played really great stuff, so.
Yeah, that helps too.
Yeah, it does. So it was, up and down, and like, there was a whole thing of, I just remember like wanting to go home in the worst way early on, but knowing that that wasn't an option. Just, suck it up and live through it. And, but then somewhere along the way, 3 or 4 weeks into it, it got better.
Yeah, just sticking with it. And and that's a tough thing, especially at that age. And that's an interesting subject, actually, like going from a comfortable lesson situation, one-on-one lesson situation, to one that is uncomfortable. And of course, like, personalities, can, rub you the wrong way as well. And it's, sometimes you just know that it's not a good fit. Was there anything that you did to be able to like get through that it was just like, I'm just going to get through this.
I think it,
'Cause
yeah, I mean, it pretty much was like, I do remember like trying so hard to, that idea. I mean, I think that depends again on your personality and stuff, but definitely for me, like a sort of a people pleaser, like trying so hard to get it right, and
Yeah.
then every lesson sort of not feeling like I
Mhm.
wasn't,
Mhm.
and getting frustrated with some of that. And I will say that one quick aside is that I did come back the following summer and I just intentionally didn't take lessons from him because I knew that mentally I could not go through that
Mhm.
again. That it was too much for me.
Mhm.
Um,
Yep.
but I was thinking about that before we met today. Just the idea of private lessons and the concept of how this is a little bit off the beaten path here, off what we're talking about, off the subject, but
Good.
the idea of lessons, how that does. I think music students learn so much. It is such a critical thing that I don't think the world, or maybe even we, give enough credit to students, like regardless of if you decide to go into music or not. But as a parent or as a whatever, like that responsibility of having to prepare and take yourself into a lesson and be personally judged
Mhm.
every week, one-on-one, there's no other class like it, right? I mean, most college students don't have to do that. You go meet with your advisor, you go meet with somebody, and maybe then you have to, be on the spot. But music
Mhm.
students do that every week without fail. And that it I mean, it takes whatever it takes, but it also it teaches you that sort of resilience, right? You have to, or they don't, they don't make it, but you learn. But that personal responsibility is such a huge thing that private lessons teaches us. And again, I think in this world when so many activities vie for our time, and people
Mhm.
don't give enough credit to, like, oh, kids don't need private lessons, but
Mhm.
it teaches them so much more than just the technique of their instrument, as you guys know. But
Mhm.
It's such a good point, and I think about it a lot, like the responsibility of being a private teacher, because you talked about, and I think I liked the way you said it, but it's like, and I'm gonna mess it up now, but it was like about kind of negative experiences. Like sometimes they're not great, but we need them sometimes. Like it teaches us things that we don't want to do or that don't work for us. And if we're self reflective enough to realize, like that's the case. But I had so many experiences that were sort of like, well, I never want to teach like that, or I won't treat my students this way, or um, you just you gain a lot of insight from that. And then, when you're with a student one-on-one, you have so much responsibility, I feel, to them, one, to like make them better musicians, but also it's a privilege, I think, to be an adult in a student's life who they get that extra time with every week, because maybe they don't even talk to their parents that much. And so it's just yeah, it's a privilege to do that for people, and to be challenging students to be better, and engaging them in their interests. And it's a really special thing, and like you said, I don't think it gets enough credit for its value.
right. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I mean, and I will think, and I'm not going to go into huge gender issues
Mm.
or whatever, but I also think I see it. I mean, like, I think I alluded to, that fact that like I'm sort of a people pleaser, or maybe I was when I'm younger. I probably, now that I'm old, not as much. But uh I see that so often, and I see it in students, and especially oftentimes young women, though, who are
Mhm.
coming into their lessons, and um, they're trying so hard, and trying to please, and to try to answer to a lot of different things when they get into college, and they're pulled in all these different directions, right? And as a private teacher, especially when they're music majors, I
Mhm.
need to say, this is it, this is your major, I need you to focus right here, right?
Mhm.
And they're saying, but I need to do this for so and so, and I need to do this for so and so,
Right.
and it's like, um you know uh and I say to so many of them, or they feel all of this pressure from a lot of different things,
Yep.
and I can't tell you, I I've often thought I want to get, they have those like painting where you can paint on wood, the board. What would I put on I always think that I want to get one in my office that says, just let that stuff go. I'm trying not to curse, but just let it all go. Like there's so much, I think that we carry so much baggage oftentimes. And I often feel like that's what you're saying, in lessons, it's so much more than just, that. And again, like the thing that I also tell college students, and that I don't think they oftentimes realize, again, when they're pleasing and they're feeling like they're doing all this stuff, that this is your time. This is the only time in your life that is entirely yours. Don't be, I have to do this because of so and so. You're not, the teacher's not making you do stuff. None of it is about, this is your time. Everybody who's in life later on, it's not your kids, it's not your spouse, it's not you have to pay your mortgage, you have to do what your boss says, you have to meet these deadlines, all of those things. You don't have a choice, or your choices are less. But in college, it is all about you. This is the time to do it, and be selfish right now, and get the most out of your money. Get your money's worth. Do everything that you can, because later on you're going to wish you did.
Yeah. And I don't think people prime kids to think that way. They don't come into school feeling like that they can say, they can take advantage of the scenario like that. And I would kill to go back and have 4 years to study whatever I wanted and to practice whenever I wanted. And
right. The practicing thing, it's like, this is your time. You've got practice room. You've got a building that you can go to. You don't got neighbors that are going to start pounding on the floor when I remember when I was in grad school and I would try to practice in my apartment, and it's like, do it now. But I mean, when hindsight is always like that. It's
of course. Well, and age gives us that perspective, and of course and we see that, like, oh, take advantage. And of course you can talk until you're blue in the face about what you think and know sometimes is better or best for them, but they're so wrapped up in themselves and their own world that it's certainly hard to get through to that. But and as you say, yes, I mean, it is a huge responsibility. I mean, we as private teachers, and even younger than college, we're a mentor, and sometimes we're a second parent, and sometimes, like, you are the only adult that they see and have that kind of contact with, and they probably have more contact with you sometimes than maybe their parents or another teacher. And of course, in a 30-minute lesson, it's hard to address all of this stuff, but and sometimes, I don't know if this ever happens with you, like sometimes, like, not a whole lot of playing can go on because there are other things that you have to, like, address, like if there are any like emotional issues, or and you have to know how to redirect. And
absolutely. It's a really multi-functioning sort of a thing. It's an all-purpose time, and it's hard to know how much to push and how much to let go, all of that kind of stuff, right? I mean,
oh yes. That's one of the hardest things, I think, is knowing how hard to push, because there are some not, if you're just giving a little nudge, then they can go off the rails.
But sometimes they need it.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think also that's another time when the difference between like high school and college, like high school, I feel like high school students are just more fragile. At least with the college students, like there's a little bit more, that where we can focus definitely more on their lessons. And I mean, I hate to say it, and maybe all 4 institutions might reconsider my contracts, but almost all of my students cry at some point in their lessons, and I feel like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm not mean.
No, but the number of lessons I cried in school were not a reflection on my teacher. They were a reflection of like me trying to learn, to grow up and to learn how to manage myself and then my expectations and other people's expectations. And
oh, absolutely. And that's what, like,
I feel for my
in
teacher.
Second lesson, I think, in like every place that I went to, because again, you're trying so hard. You're trying so hard. And that feeling, I mean, I suffered from all of that. Like, I just felt like I was never good enough, all the imposter syndrome and all of that kind of stuff that we go through, which is, I mean, so that's the thing, like with my students, I'm always, I try to reinforce with all of my students, like, never, like, I'm old. I have made every stupid mistake there is, like, and plus I had two teenage and now, men, but I had two boys at my house who, like, I saw every stupid thing happen too. So there's no judgment. We all live through it. Life is a mess. You're doing the best you can. So, all of that, and then when I used to teach oral skills, same thing. I was like, just sing. Like, I don't have perfect pitch. I am an awful singer. Make the mistakes. And I remember when I was in college, I actually tested out of all of the year training that I needed to take for my degree. So when I was in school, there was oral skills 1, 2, and 3. Like, each was a year, or 3 was no, 3 was a year. They were each a year. And brass players, woodwind players only needed to take 1. But brass players needed to take 2. And the written theory was separate from the oral skills, but brass players needed to take oral skills 2. And then, so I tested out of oral skills 2, sight singing 2. But for the theory degree, you had to take the 3rd level, and you had to pass. I think I was afraid to take sight singing too, so I took that. So I just took a sight singing class that I didn't really need to take, but it was like to boost my confidence so I could take the exam. And I'll never forget, our teacher was just like, he was the nicest man. He was an organ teacher, and we just like sang. We would just go in and sight sing, and sometimes it was just awful, right? And he would just laugh, and he was like, I'm not laughing at you, but I'm sorry, that was just funny. I think I sort of adopted that myself, like, because sometimes it is like, you are so far off the rails, it is just only laughable. But not bad. I mean, we're all learning. Gosh, like I said, I am no perfect pitch. I was playing at the Fulton just in the couple weeks ago in January into February, and I was so uncomfortable in the chair, so I went crazy and I bought myself a seat cushion. I feel like that's making me super old right there. Like, that was just
no.
And anyway, I could not get comfortable on the seat cushion. I'm like, and then like after like 2 days, I realized I had it turned the wrong way. So I was like, I am a grown-up adult person. I couldn't even figure out how to work a seat cushion. Okay, so whatever mistakes you made, I have no judgment.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, who knows? That might be a musician thing too. I don't know. Also, that's also about like making the students comfortable in that environment too, because it is an uncomfortable situation being in a sightseeing.
Don't we all take ourselves too seriously? We put so much like pressure in music, like, I've got to be so good and everything has to be so perfect, and like, it's good to have some levity in that.
Shari, what do you think are the biggest challenges in this career path of being like, performer and adjunct teacher? Like, what to you are the biggest challenges?
I mean, I think it's hard. I'm incredibly fortunate, and I mean, I'm fortunate because, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, I took a lot of time off when, I finished my master's in theory, and then we moved here like right at the same time. And my husband had his job teaching at Kutztown, and I had my kids, like, it was right, at that time, and I didn't know a soul here. And I didn't know how to get a job. I didn't know how to promote myself. I didn't know how to network. I didn't know anything.
Mhm.
And I was enough, well, I guess, nervous or, too frightened to try to figure it out. I'm also a little bit, more than a little bit, stubborn, and not always, I'm not always the best at playing by the rules or doing what I'm supposed to do. So there's a certain amount of that. Like, I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. And then and then there's also the fact that, like, I have all of these other interests that I like. So, and we have a farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere, and I sort of was maybe a little burnt out, and so I just stopped. I quit playing my horn essentially for almost 7 years. I hardly played at all. I quit music, and I raised my kids, and and again, like, I never, ever, ever in my, if you would have told my 17-year-old self that I would do that, I would have, never believed it. I never intended to be a stay-at-home mom. But it just worked out that way. And I was okay with it, and we could, and it just was easier, that path of least resistance, rather than in a strange place trying to find, with no family here, trying to find childcare and figuring out how to find it and pay for it. And then for me to try to, like, meet the right people and figure out how to network and get jobs, it just felt it was too overwhelming for me. And so I didn't do it. I just closed the door. I would play my horn in church like maybe once a year, and that's it. And then as my kids got it, and then I found myself missing music. And so I started to sing in the choir of Bethlehem. I just, like, a friend of mine was a singer, and I saw that they were having auditions, and I thought, well, that would be like some decent music, and I could meet some people maybe. So I started doing that. And it was a really great thing. And I met a trombonist who plays in the Main Street Brass at that point. Well, he still does. And he heard, like, when I introduced myself at the very first rehearsal, that I played the horn, and they were like, one time desperate for a sub. Like, at the very last minute, the horn player got the flu or something. And so they said, could you come play, like a graduation or something? And so I did. And so I started subbing with them a little bit. So I just, like, very gradually got back into playing the horn. So, I mean, I just think that, but I mean, so I was fortunate because I never had to make a living doing it, right? And I mean, I think about that a lot now. I mean, I admire everybody who does it. Kirsten, like you with your kids, and all the people who do it. And I honestly don't know, just that idea. I think it's frustrating. It's so frustrating that we work so hard. I feel like I work really hard. I mean, I have this part-time job where I, as an executive director, which, I mean, I work way more than my part-time-ish thing. And I teach at 4 schools, and I, I mean, like, I play, I'm busy playing. And I, we just did our taxes, as I'm sure you did. And I look at what my husband makes, and he works hard too. Don't get me wrong. He
yeah.
Plenty of it. And I look at what I make, and I think, thank goodness we have his salary, because if it were just me, I would be dying. And so I think that's the hardest thing. And it's frustrating. And how do people make a living? That's a hard thing.
Yes. And that's like one of my biggest questions to other musicians is, like, how do you make it work? Especially, for, like, the performer teacher, private teacher and such. Like, oh my gosh, it's so admirable for people who are able to do that and stand on their own 2 feet and be able to afford life, because it is incredibly difficult to do that unless you have somebody else in your family who is, earning another paycheck.
And who has benefits, right? Healthcare, and it's huge.
Yeah.
And that's why I hate to always be a downer when like my students come to me or anybody comes to me about like a career in music or majoring in music, and I'm only repeating advice or that I got, and not just me, but I went to the Banff Center one summer. They, I don't know if they still do, but they used to have um a, a what am I trying to say? Not a festival, but like a school. And it was master classes. It was like 3 or 4 weeks, and it was just master classes for like 5 hours a day. Um, and Fredis Vekra was teaching there, and she is a really, really prominent pedagogue. She's Norwegian and just this amazing horn teacher. A player too, but like her teaching is just, she's just in demand all over the world as a teacher. And I will just never forget her saying to all of us at the time, if you can do anything else and be happy, you should do that. And she said, and the be happy part is important. She's saying, I'm not telling, don't, if that's what if that's what makes you happy and it's the thing that makes you happy, do it and go for it and wholeheartedly. But if you can do something else and be happy, you should do that, because pretty much anything else you're going to do is going to be an easier path, and you can keep music in your life, which is what I tell everybody. It's what I told my kids. And I don't care how much talent you have. I don't care how good you are. If you can do something else and be happy, I think you should go do it and keep music in your life. There's no reason, we all know that, but and how many people do we know that are doctors or in the middle, or like who are doing lawyers and all these sort of things, who have incredibly great careers, and they have then they don't have the anxiety and the struggle of paying their bills, and they're still, a lot of them are just amazing musicians, and then they can support the arts as well. There's so
yeah,
I definitely think, and it's not giving up. I think that there's such a in the music world, I think that's a thing where people feel like it's giving up if you do that, and there's like a can be a little bit of a negative impression, or that somehow that's less, and I don't think that's fair either.
Right. Yeah. I think it's hard not to feel less when you know that you're not earning.
Absolutely.
And
well,
I think
go ahead.
I mean, it's part of my own complex, like like when I feel like I'm not doing enough, or like I feel like I'm not earning enough, and I'm like, how much time am I devoting, to this, but Morgan and I talked about this the other day, like, you can't necessarily be a martyr to your career either.
Yeah. But the hard part, what I was going to say is, the hard part is we feel less if we're not earning enough, and we feel less if we quit. So like, no matter which way you slice it, you have that sense, I think most of us do, that we're giving up. And it's really hard, and it's there's like no answer to it. I mean, because it's just like, if you want to pursue something, sometimes just out of like the sheer, like, we obviously see a value in music, so we're doing it out of this like sheer sense of value versus practicality. It's not a practical thing to do.
And I will say that I also did the summer at Banff, and I did a summer at the Teton Festival in the Teton National Park, and that was like a teaching orchestra sort of thing. And I remember in one of my lessons there, the teacher said to me, you could, it was right after I graduated from Oberlin, and he was like, you could get a job as a player. There's no reason why you can't. He said, you just have to be a Marine. And he's like, you have to go to boot camp. You have to spend 8 hours. You have to live, eat, and breathe French horn. And he's like, for as long as you have to do it for a while. You have to do boot camp. You have to do this for a while until you get the job. And I think at some point I decided, I don't want to be a Marine, and that's okay. Like, we don't need an entire nation of Marines.
Right.
Yeah, we need some, but somehow if you choose to not be a Marine, it's not like society thinks that you're a big loser and you gave up, I mean, it's just a choice. But somehow, like, as a musician, when I decided that I want to be able to knit things, and I want to be able to cook things, and I want to be able to go hiking, and I want to be able to do these other things. And if I choose to do those things instead of practicing 8 hours a day, am I less of a person? You know, I mean,
yeah. Well, no,
hard.
because you think you know yourself better if you choose that.
But it's hard to get to that place. And I mean, it took me till I was like, 50 to like totally be okay with that. You know what I mean? Like at the time, like, well, I guess I failed at boot camp, but
yeah.
But that's also the beauty of aging as well, yeah, that you can accept those kinds of, that you can accept that, you want to have a whole life and not, have it just be like just live in one aspect of it. So it is about being the executive director of the Friends of, what is it? The Friends of Chamber Music of Reading. Is that right? Okay. Right. So can you tell us a little bit more about that organization, and like how long have you been a part of that?
Yeah, Friends of Chamber Music of Reading actually has been in existence since like the 1950s, and they present chamber music concerts in downtown Reading, free of charge, always free of charge, and they bring in world famous chamber ensembles. So they're like really top, like people who like literally world. Brentano Quartet, who's been performing there for like 28 years or something like that. They are the in residence at Yale, and they are like the gold standard of string quartets. Just amazing. I've been working with them for almost 10 years now, and I was at a point when my kids were in high school. My older son was, I think, a senior, and I just heard about the job from somebody, and I was just looking for work. I just knew that we were going to be facing a lot of college tuition payments coming up, and I wasn't, getting a lot of playing, and I had been, I at that point I was playing piano. I'm on as a staff accompanist at Kutztown, and I was playing a lot of piano and really, really miserable. I hated it. And so I was like, I need to do something. And this job came up, and I had done a lot of secretarial work in my past. And so I thought, well, I can do administrative secretarial things. And this is why I said, like, I had a lot of it, they talked about, like, can you write grants? And I'm like, well, I don't know about necessarily, I'm an okay writer, and I have a pretty good understanding how grant processes work, since I had worked as a grants administrator in microbiology when I was, right out of grad school. So I got the job. Really, I mean, it was really kind of them sort of to do it, because I had no clue what I was doing. But it's been amazing for me, I think, as a musician, because one, they just get, the concerts are so inspiring, and I am just constantly blown away by every ensemble that comes through there. And they get sometimes very young ensembles we hire who are just starting out, and or we have these people who've been playing together for years. McDonald Cho Rosen, Robert McDonald teaches at Curtis. Marcy Rosen teaches in New York, and she runs the Chesapeake competition down, Chesapeake Chamber competition down in Maryland. And Catherine Cho teaches at Juilliard, and they've been together, and they are just, again, top of the game. We get so many of these people, and they have been performing and training musicians, and seeing them and hearing them perform, and the joy that they have when they play, and that they're constantly exploring. And I think, it really, when I started going to the concerts, just made me realize how alive the field is. And I think that it's a little bit different. Like sometimes it's like, yeah, I wish, of course, like, oh, I wish I could be doing that. But in the trenches, so to speak, I'm just subbing in here and there and teaching my lessons and scrapping for whatever playing I can get, and grateful for it. You forget that there's all this really, really, really super amazing music being made in places, and thinking like, I while I'm, never going to be that because I gave up on the Marines a long time ago, but I can do my own version of that. I can make something of that myself. And I think it really helped rekindle my love for music and my wish to make music. And I think I started doing my own recitals at Kutztown a little bit after that, just because like, I want to play, I want to play with my friends and do stuff. And the pieces that I want to play, nobody's going to do it for me. And I think that's a thing that I learned as I got older to another age thing. Nobody is going to do it for me. At this point, if I want opportunities, I need to make the opportunities. If I want to do this stuff, and I'm going to do it and figure it out. And you know.
Right. And that certainly encourages you just to level up, right? In your own playing and for your own students.
And then, there's always the opportunity to talk to the musicians, and every one of them is just like the most down to earth. They know because they've been there and they're doing it all the time. And they are incredibly warm and generous and giving and supportive of everybody. And they love to see all of the students there, young and old. And we almost always bring those ensembles and do an educational outreach at one of the public schools in the afternoon. And then they do the concert at night, like I said, always free of charge. So anybody can walk in. And the WCR, the hall is like, acoustically a beautiful space. And the people are all really wonderful. So I feel like I just fell into that. Like that was definitely fortuitous. Like that was one of the luckiest connections I've made, and it was just total happenstance. So it's great. I feel really privileged, and I've met so many wonderful musicians through that.
Yeah, I attended one of those, only one, just a couple of years ago when Philippe Tondra was playing the Mozart oboe quartet with David Kim and other performers from the Philadelphia Orchestra, and it was incredible. And to have that locally was it was inspiring. And then they came out and then they talked to people after the concert, and you're trying to pick your jaw up off the floor while you're like talking to these people, and it's
great. And the hall is so funny because Reading is maybe seen better days, some parts of it, and I love that. I always say it's like Diagon Alley in Harry Potter, right? Like it just looks like nothing from the outside, and then you open the doors and you go in, and there's like this big Tiffany
chandelier,
and it's just gorgeous. And honestly, since we don't sell tickets, we rely on just patron donations and grant support, and we oftentimes can't pay, all the time, can't pay the musicians like what, it's always, I've learned a lot about negotiating with the management through the years, because the management will tell me this is what their fee is, and I have to say, well, that's out of our budget. And but the musicians come back year after year because they love the space, they love the audience. It's really special, and we have like so many musicians, they want to come back. They ask to come back to our series, and that it's free. And I'm always telling people, when like I am so not a formal person. Obviously, you can see my messy house. So I'm like, you don't have to dress up. Doesn't matter what you wear. We don't care what you wear. You know what? You're tired. Come, leave at the half. You didn't pay anything for it. You're not losing your money.
You're making it accessible.
Bit,
Yeah. You're making it accessible to people.
And that's and we need that. We need the like encouragement of just like it's okay to just show up as you are. Like get it, don't get it. Leave, don't leave.
Intimidating. I get that it can be intimidating if you're not used to it, and there's that sort of mystique. People talk about it, the whole mystique around classical music and all of that sort of stuff. And again, almost more because it's this tiny little intimate space, and a lot of the audience has been going for a lot of years. So I get how walking into that is like can be nerve-wracking. I feel like every time, like when you sub with somebody, like we were sort of saying earlier, or you sub in an orchestra or something like that, it just feels like I'm so nervous. Where's the green room and what's the all the protocols. And I think that's what audience members feel like when they're just coming to a concert, classical concert for the first time. It can be intimidating.
And I was just going to ask you about the event that you had this this weekend.
Yeah, so this was a thing that I wanted to do for a long time, and I've been pitching it to the board. And I mean, just logistics, it's a difficult thing. But this year I was able, so I talked fast enough, or I brought it up enough times, and I got support from Kutztown University, and I had talked with different things about trying to run a chamber, a low level, again, not just like not like everybody practice and be the best you can, and we just want your, students who are going off to the very top places. I was like, I want people to realize, kids to realize, like, chamber music should be, what it was, 300 years ago or whatever, when it started. Like, let's just get together and play chamber music with your friends. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be, so like jazz combos or garage bands get together. Like, why, you can get together with your friends, and especially now, IMSLP, geez, find music and play together. But I mean, I get that kids don't have the skills. School teachers don't have time to be doing that kind of stuff there. Again, like I said, I have so much respect. So my thing was like, just have kids fill out an application, give us a general idea of your level. We'll assign you to a string quartet of other folks and come on campus. We'll have coaches for everybody, because kids don't, I get it. They don't know how to rehearse this stuff. And so have coaches work with them and just see what you can do in a day, essentially. And then at the end of the day, everybody get together and play for each other. And so we had it Saturday.
Yeah, that's great.
It's a great idea.
It was, we limited it. I needed to limit it to strings, because I just felt like we're going to start small and make it manageable and all that kind of stuff. And I will say, very honestly, so much thanks to Brian Mishler, who brought a bunch of his kids from Parkland already in ensembles. But we had, some kids also that did, we, put some string quartets together. It ended up being more, but it was great. And then we had students, a string quartet from Stony Brook, doctoral students came down and were the coaches. And one of the students there, she went to Exeter High School. So I wanted a Berks County connection. And they played so well, and the kids loved them. Do you know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, even though it was just those few hours, they were like, asking the coaches for their emails and like, make sure, get a picture with our group. And they just performed a little concert for each other. And I was like, this is not fancy. We're not, again, so many families came to the little concert, which was just like, at 3:00. And I couldn't believe how many parents were driving their kids to this festival. And we had one little 7th grader come, and he was just the sweetest thing. And, he was assigned to a group that was probably we had somebody out because of the flu, and so his group wasn't able to run, so we ended up, and he's like, I'm just trying my best, and we're like, that's all that we're asking. And he was so cute, and he did a great job.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I heard somebody say, like, one of the kids say to somebody else, like, maybe we could get together and do this, and I thought, that's what it's all about. So
yeah, right.
Really, really happy and gratified. And I worked with Kutztown. Kutztown was so generous, and we were able to use the facilities, for free. And Peter, I should say, the orchestra conductor, was because I don't know anything about assigning students to string quartets. So he, handled all the applications and, vetted all the videos and all that kind of stuff and made the assignments. And so.
Wow. Awesome.
That's great.
That's so great. So you're going to do it again next year, right?
Yeah.
Good. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Shari, thank you so much for chatting with us today. And yeah, it's been great. We are so grateful for all the work you do and that you continue to do for our community. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's great to talk to you. I feel like an idiot, and
you are not.
This is really fun. And I watched or listened to and watched a bunch of your previous ones, and I just think it's really interesting. And I think that you guys are great for bringing this stuff to light and taking your time to do it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Shari. And thank you to our listeners. We are so glad that you're out there supporting us. If you ever have the chance, please give us feedback. We love to hear from our listeners, especially if you have any questions or suggestions. You can always contact us at lifebetweenthe.notes@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and video versions can be found on our Life Between the Notes YouTube channel. So follow us at all of these places and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And with that, have a great day, and thank you, Morgan, and thank you, Shari.